Welcome, Go AI listeners. We're super thrilled. Today we have Lisa Cole. She's the Chief Marketing Officer and head of the AI Center for Excellence at 2X, which provides B2B marketing services largely for enterprise clients. And she is brilliant. She's also the author of the Limitless CMO, Transform Marketing from Order Taking to Market Making in the Age of AI. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for the conversation.
So Lisa, tell me a little bit. You're a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. You've been in this land prior to AI. Tell us a little bit about your journey in marketing.
Well, I'm going to date myself a little bit. I've been in marketing for about 25 years. If you figure out that timeline, I've been a marketer for all of these major moments, all the way back to when companies were asking, should I have a website, right? And so that's kind of where it started. And just through the years, I have seen the rise of the mobile phones, smartphones, social media, and this one feels different in the sense that it's putting pressure on go-to-market teams, particularly marketers, on two fronts. It's changing the way we all research, evaluate, and buy things, regardless of how complex those things are. I avoid sea of blue links at all costs, right? So now I will use a variety of models to get to the answer much faster. I'll also use it to even kind of distill the information I've received about the thing that I'm thinking about buying. Secondly, it's also reimagining or rewriting how we get marketing done today, like how the business of marketing gets executed. And because of that, it's disrupting on two fronts. It really is. It just increases the surface area and makes it that much more challenging to figure out a way to best execute it. So exciting times. For every moment I feel like we are faced with disruption, I feel like we have an amazing opportunity. So, yeah.
I always say it's an unprecedented opportunity.
We've
And
had a
so,
lot of unprecedented times over the
yeah.
last decade or so. We could probably stand to have a fewer unprecedented times, but it is a great time to be a marketer.
Yes. Well, and
Well,
speaking
and
of that,
speaking of that,
marketers are a group that generative AI tools, especially have been useful for.
yeah.
So from whether it's ideation or content creation, just assistance with marketing research, from a CMO standpoint, what are some of the most innovative uses for generative AI that you're seeing right now in marketing?
Oh, it spans. The most innovative are those use cases where we have historically struggled to drive pipeline impact and revenue impact. So it's across the go-to-market motions. We have, particularly over the last decade, we've had these disjointed tech stacks. Our data's everywhere. To execute any sort of campaign, we have a lot of this swivel chair syndrome, and then being able to prove the impact of all those things that we do because of the data being in the state that it's in across all of these disparate, disjointed technologies owned by disjointed groups. Um, that has been really difficult. So the ability to drive impact and then the ability to prove it, what that I think that's where the most innovation is happening. I think we're witnessing the rise of lots of new titles like go-to-market engineering, which by and large is the application of AI to those motions that have been cumbersome and disjointed and misaligned from how buyers actually buy anything. So some of the edge cases that you're seeing are AI SDRs. Whether or not you believe in replacing a human with AI, that's an example of one of the many use cases across that go-to-market motion. That's for the most innovative, the most impactful from a marketing standpoint, because we have dealt with what I call the marketing resource paradox since the beginning of time. These unreasonable expectations never met by the resources that we are provided to try to keep up with those unreasonable expectations. That's where we're using AI for scale, whether it's you know, ideation, strategy development, messaging, versioning, copywriting, all of that. That's giving us scale that we've never had before. So, yeah.
I like how you brought up the word disruption earlier, because we were just talking to somebody on a previous recording of this podcast episode who is a self-described disruption expert. And AI, of course, is a disruptive technology. But what comes with disruption is often transformation. And so if we can go a little bit into your book, I am taken by the order taking to market making transformation. How does AI drive this in a marketing context? And how is AI transforming marketing in, as you describe it within this book, to just give us a sneak preview of what's within it?
Well, I think first off, we should just recognize that AI, because of the things that we can now do with AI, it gives us an opportunity to get out of the business of being the order taking function of an organization. By design, it helps change the conversation. I don't know that there are many people in an organization that recognize AI's impact on how people are buying. So that in and of itself, there is a recognition that marketing has visibility to what's happening there and no one else does. So by design, people are asking, okay, well, how do we make sure that we are visible in ChatGPT and Gemini? So they see that. And so even just that in and of itself. But the book, the hypothesis here is that we are now faced in a moment, we're facing an opportunity where we can change the conversations we have, run marketing more like a business. And with that, we start with, well, what are the things we should be doing in service of the business strategy? And then you kind of think through, well, what are all the levers that we have to get that work done, of which happens to be leveraging AI for the execution of that body of work. So it kind of requires a number of things, but AI presents the opportunity to have the conversations that we couldn't have before. That's the big thing. We might have had a seat at the table, but the seat at the table is almost like the kids' seat at the table, right? You know, there's conversations being had, and then inevitably it turns into a body of work. Well, marketing can just do that for us. Now it's like it. I see your head shaking. Like that's historically how it's been. But
Well, and Lisa,
AI,
like that resonates so much with me because Guarding Out Digital was born to be a partner in marketing. To your point earlier about, you've been in this for 25 years. This feels, familiar but different. And I remember, Google Ads and paid media businesses saying that was spam and it was the yellow pages and that didn't work. And now, I can throw a rock and hit a business that's using, pay-per-click advertising. And one of the things that really resonates is marketers not being order takers. Us just not, oh, here, go play with this, but really coming to the table with AI, with numbers that show the return on your investment in the whole story that now is visible. And to your point, it allows a more business conversation in marketing that to me can be really impactful.
Yeah, no.
Are you seeing that? Okay.
Yeah, I am seeing it. What's interesting is, again, AI is creating opportunities for us to have that conversation, the big kids conversation. It's also bringing capabilities forward that candidly for us to be able to execute by ourselves within our function was like physically impossible before, or to be able to execute it by ourselves to bring interactive lead magnets to life without having to depend on some development function and 6 months later, bring it to life. That's enable us to do things we never could do before at a pace that's just pretty extraordinary. So back to the question: disruptive change, transformation. Anytime you're fundamentally changing, like how you show up, it is going to drive change. This book is based on 25 years of experience in I had led 3 other marketing transformations, you could argue, before the age of AI or before AI really set its claws into us. And I was brought into these roles because marketing had become these bloated, underappreciated, overworked doers of things. Like, this is the group that made things branded, that executed support work for sales and sent the email because product house said you should do it. And they wanted a growth engine. And in doing that, marketing had to go on the hook for a number. And what that requires, anybody that's ever taken a marketing function and transformed it into a growth engine that could prove impact on pipeline and revenue, you realize everything has to change. Mm-hmm. Your skill sets have to change. The campaigns that go out to market have to change. The technology you have has to change, like how the work gets done, the reports, the dashboards, all of it. And so that transformation, this is not new. There have been marketing leaders in driving transformation, but now on top of that, they're also dealing with having to think through how do they compete with AI native companies. So that, I don't know who it was that you were talking to that was the master of disruption, transformation. My guess is there's some conversation there around, well, why is this not an option? Like, why do marketers have to lean into this moment? And it's because of AI native startups are stealing share of attention and market share from industry leading organizations that have dominated for decades.
So, well, and since, so obviously there's a just challenge in transformation in and of itself. Yeah. And these organizations, the ones that you're working with that are enterprise level, what signals do you look for that tell you or I guess signal to you that that enterprise is transformation ready? They're ready to start incorporating AI tools and implementing AI, not just on the edges, but embedding. What are some of those signals you look for?
They actually know how the work of marketing gets done day to day. So one of the most common complaints that you might hear in a CMO community is, I have made investments in AI. We all have licenses. We've done some training. Seems like I have AI everywhere, but impact nowhere. It's like the most common refrain. And if you really dig into that, what you figure out is they never actually stopped to reimagine the work. So they gave everybody access to a variety of AI tools, but they never reimagined the work. And usually, back to your question, how do you know when they're ready? They've actually inspected how the work gets done to then pick, well, what's the highest impact, lowest effort way to apply AI to drive impact faster. A good example, my favorite question to ask marketing leaders is, and because it's pretty telling, how many days does it take for your organization to get from an idea or a market opportunity into a campaign, and that campaign is in front of the audience that you intended to reach? How many days does that take? And in a mid-market or enterprise company, the answer oftentimes is between 90 and 120 days.
Really?
And the reason for that is because they didn't realize that there are 7 handoffs across the campaign. And for every one of those handoffs, there are 3 people that need to have to review and approve whatever those handoffs are. So you end up looking at, even if you apply AI to it, if each person has figured out how to make their task faster, they never took the friction out of the actual end-to-end workflow. So you're not getting to market faster. And you could argue, if you have 3 people reviewing and approving every asset across 7 handoffs, you're probably not improving the quality of what's happening. It usually gets watered down. So you likely aren't getting more impact. You might get more stuff, but it's not getting into market faster. Those organizations that are ready, somewhere in the org, they know what those key workflows are and how it gets done, and they're ready to reimagine it. So That's my favorite.
I love that.
Campaign.
Connor, I always say you can't automate what you aren't inspecting.
And I know that there are some CMOs, particularly the larger the organization, the thing they don't tell you when you come out of college and you want to be a marketer and someday you think you want to be a CMO, they don't tell you that as you advance your career, the further away you get from actually doing the marketing. You spend more of your time on people development and stakeholder managing or selling marketing to non-marketers. So you don't really stay in the weeds of, well, what does it take to get a campaign out the door? You don't really, you don't get that kind of visibility because you're not micromanaging 100 or 1,000 people. And that's where AI gets lost. Because they might have all the AI, it doesn't necessarily mean they've applied it to have an impact. So if they're willing to reimagine their work, for example, they actually know how a campaign gets in the market with clarity. And they recognize that there's a reason. They have a sense of urgency to change that. They're good.
I love that question.
Yeah, me too.
For a given enterprise client, I'm imagining that there's multiple scenarios. Everyone is different, but I would imagine that they're either coming to you and saying, hey, we're not using AI, but we need to figure out what we want to use, what we should be using, or we're already using AI and here's what we're using. Is there a heuristic that you follow for these cases where you say, okay, here's the right AI tool for you, or alternatively, if they're already using it, is this the right AI tool that you're using, or should you look elsewhere?
I think historically we just have been very tech agnostic. We have clients that come to us in three states, particularly with AI. The first one is they already have an AI strategy. They have already defined their usage guidelines or data privacy. They likely have even picked the LLM that matters most to them, that is the approved. They know all the specialist tools that different team members would use. But their job is accelerating the application of that to real world use cases and figuring out which workflows, and within which workflows, which applications would be most impactful, or measuring it. And so we don't even try to influence it. At that point, what we're doing is saying, we have these composable assets. Could be agents, it could be skills, it could be custom GPTs, it could be gems. And our job is to then deploy it in whatever their environment is. That's 10 to 15% of the time. The majority of the time is the second scenario where they come to us and say, we're under pressure. We need to figure out how to apply AI. We don't even know where to start. What do we do? Do you have suggestions? They might even have licenses to a bunch of things, and it could be just random acts of AI. I love my Claude, so I'm not letting that go. And somebody else might be totally addicted to ChatGPT. In that scenario, we do have to get them aligned on what should be the brain for your workflows. Let's pick one. And then what's the approved orchestrator? Because inevitably there needs to be some sort of wrapper or orchestrator where these workflows are going to be orchestrated from or kind of executed from. Sometimes a company has Zapier or N8N. In that situation, we will suggest where these could be set up for them. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, where's all your knowledge? Where are all the background, the context, where are all the documents, your brand guidelines of things? And so sometimes our job is to just help them get their house in order to figure out if they genuinely are under pressure but have not started. Then it's a matter of, we likely just leverage the tech stack we have to execute on the behalf. Roll in the token costs related to their resources they subscribe to, and then once they're up and running, they can then evaluate what works for them. But we try to be agnostic, just like we would on a CRM or a marketing automation platform or ABM platform. We recognize that every organization has its own requirements. And then the third scenario, which is a group that I think should be studied, there's a small percentage of groups, companies that do not want us to use any AI on their behalf. And so by design, we have to brick the equipment that the resources actually use to execute their work. So there aren't many, But there are some out there that, and they usually are the organizations that really worry about their IP. So
Okay.
it makes sense in some cases, right? So, yeah,
Well,
agnostic, but we have to adapt for all three environments for sure.
so one of the things, and you mentioned a little bit about it here from a token and the usage and the sustainability part. And I know you have something in your bio about helping these enterprises grow sustainably with AI. And that word is just thrown around, I think, for a lot of people. And so in regards to tokens and usage and scaling, what are some best practices that you are using or implementing that you feel should be priority when it comes to sustaining or sustainable growth through AI at an enterprise level?
Yeah. Well, I'll just take it, I'm going to bring it up one level and say the sustainable growth thing requires marketers tend to have most of their budget locked up in personnel, technology contracts, and long term event contracts. And so, if you know that to be true, what's happening is that AI licensing is being taken from the program dollars because it's the only thing that's flexible. It's the only thing that they've not financially committed to something. So that's the first thing is the marketer has to kind of reevaluate what's the strategy for AI within my org. If it is a productivity enhancement, how do I use that to lower the cost of personnel? If it's I need to lift the impact of a program, it makes sense to pull it from the program spend, but I'm going to have to free it up from somewhere else. So that's the first thing is where are your resources going anyways, because you can't afford to keep your budget entirely locked up and steal from the only bucket that was meant to fuel the pipeline. So think about that. As
Yep.
it relates specifically to AI, back to the question we were talking about, how do you know when an organization is ready to really embrace AI and apply it in a smart way? They figure out how their work gets done. The only way to really have an understanding of what the cost will be in the application of AI is knowing the implication of automating that workflow or those workflows and how many times you'll have to automate or deploy that workflow. There are lots of ways, wrappers, there are dashboards that you can set up, even things like emerging tools like Paperclip and OpenCloud. They're enabling you to kind of track your token costs.
Okay.
But the first thing is you have to get visibility to it and then be able to understand what are we going to automate it with it and be able to set them up, test those workflows, and see how much you'd expect to pay in tokens every time that workflow runs. And so there is very much okay, what should we automate? Highest impact, lowest effort. Okay, within that, how often does that workflow need to run? Who is going to have access to run that workflow? So you have to kind of control it, not just how many times you get run, but who actually will be running it, and start to forecast your costs like that. But making sure that you know where that money is going to come from. So it's certainly the components of how does work get done, who's going to initiate it, and can you monitor it? Can you have visibility to it? And for that, you might need some sort of wrapper or dashboard to be able to track that.
No, that's great. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Okay. It's I think that there's countless thought leadership articles and videos right now on people freaking out about token costs. And even in the non-marketers, so Sam Altman didn't help us saying 95% of marketing can be done by AI. Like, okay, maybe you don't know all the things that happen in marketing, but you still need humans.
Yes.
Within that, the next piece of it is a lot of people think, well, if I don't need humans, I could save all this money. Well, okay, you
Can you?
do need some humans, but have you actually figured out the work that the humans were doing that you're going to automate and how expensive it'll be to apply the tokens there? So it's not a complete savings, it's going to be offset. And depending on how effectively and efficiently you manage that work, like if I took that 127-day campaign that, is 7 handoffs with 3 approvers, right? that might actually be more like costly than just letting the humans do it the way they've always done it. If they didn't reimagine the work, that could still be a very bloated workflow that costs $35 every time it runs. Well, how many times is somebody going to run it? So, anyways, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for a reason.
Very great examples too. And again, just you have to automate it. And those workflows, if it touches 7 people, how it's being done now today might not necessarily be the right process to automate for AI. So it brilliantly said.
One of the other lenses that could be applied here, also helpful in understanding what something might cost from a token perspective, is getting clear on what good enough looks like. And so one of the reasons why a workflow can get cumbersome and bloated is because they do have 3 reviewers, but those 3 reviewers don't align on what good enough thinks it looks like before it gets deployed. And so it ends in this endless human in the loop cycle with rework. That's another driver for extraordinarily high unexpected costs. Yeah.
I did want to ask, because you did mention your experience in marketing, just from a CMO perspective, what personally in your role has AI just fundamentally changed how you do your job, and where you look at it and say, okay, this has really just changed the game for just going forward?
I might have hinted at it, but there's 2 ways that this has changed it. As a CMO, the way I use it personally, I now have an always-on thought partner in my phone with me at all points in time. And the thing that occurred to me is that a lot of times where I get inspiration or I recognize that there's an opportunity in the market, sometimes it's Saturday at 11 o'clock at night. And I just want to capture the idea, but I also want to flesh it out so that on Monday, when I meet with my team, I can kind of talk through an idea, a recommendation, something to act on. I no longer have to wake up a member of my team or bother them on the weekend to kind of flesh out this thought. I have an always-on thought partner. And the other piece to that always-on thought partner, while it does amplify my strengths, it also addresses some of my personal weaknesses. So where I may not have a depth of expertise around, let's say, crisis communications or product marketing, right? Let's say these are not areas where I'm particularly strong. I know how to prompt and give the right role and context for my always-on thought partner to address that or maybe offset that gap I have. So personally for me, it magnifies my superhuman, it turns my strengths into superhuman superpowers. It covers my weaknesses, and it gives me somebody to I guess you could say brainstorm with over the weekends. Secondly, and I see this is true across my whole team, we get these ideas and we used to have to wait on somebody else with a technical capability to bring it to life for us. We can get to a prototype in minutes now. Like not weeks, not months, not a year until somebody can pull it off their backlog. No, this weekend I pulled together and developed 5 lead magnets for my sales team to use out there, and they gave me feedback in an email on a Monday, and I gave that feedback to the model, and it made all the changes in seconds. So like that bringing ideas to life so fast is so amazing. So those 2.
I love that, Lisa. Again, unprecedented times, but there's also unprecedented opportunity, especially if you like creating, to your point, taking an idea and bringing it to life. So Lisa, thank you. It has just been a privilege to spend some time with you today. If our audience wants to get in contact with you, we'll of course drop your email and website in the show notes. Is there anything else or anywhere else that they can connect with you?
I regularly share lessons learned, both good and challenging, on LinkedIn. So you can always follow me there. And then, if you are wrestling with some of these challenges as a team, there's also my website, my company's website, 2x.com. That's it.
And we will drop that in the chat. Lisa, recognized by Serious Decisions, Forrester, Demand Gen Report, and CMO Alliances as C.M.O.s to watch. She's an author, owner. She is incredible. So, Lisa, thank you. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was nice talking with you.
Thanks for coming on.
Take care.